So the BIGKiDs Study is our effort here at Boston Children's Hospital to collect as many patients as possible with nephrotic syndrome and ask them to be involved in our research study to help us discover the genetic molecular causes of their kidney disease and to understand what the biology is that underlies those genetic changes, but also helps us to understand the clinical implications of having these genetic changes. And the way we do this is we enroll children in BIGKiDs and we ask for permission to look into their medical record, and then we ask patients and maybe their family members to donate samples to us. They can donate blood, they can donate urine, they can donate saliva, and if they get a kidney biopsy, they can donate kidney tissue. And we store that information, both the clinical information and these biosamples, for the time when we use those samples to create genetic data, and then we do all the analyses. A biobank simply is a structure to house and hold both clinical information and biosamples for patients with a certain trait or condition. You can think of it as a biobank is a place where patients come to deposit things. They deposit samples and they deposit their clinical information. And then the folks at the bank, the researchers, can go to the bank and withdraw those samples and that clinical information and put them together to try to make important discoveries to help improve the health of children with kidney diseases. Well, the BIGKiDs Study works first by finding patients who have proteinuric kidney disease or nephrotic syndrome. When we first started BIGKiDs, my team and I, we looked through the charts at Boston Children's Hospital, the schedules of patients who were going to come in or who were admitted to the hospital, and we looked to find patients with nephrotic syndrome. The next step is once we identify those patients, we ask those patients, physicians, whether it's okay if we connect with these patients to see if they want to enroll in the BIGKiDs Study. And it's really important that we get the patient's doctors involved because they might know if the patient is not at a good time in their life to be part of a study or if it's not the right situation. But for the most part, the doctors say, sure, you can approach the family. So the next step of the BIGKiDs Study is then we approach families and ask if they'd be interested in learning more about the BIGKiDs Study. We give them lots of information about the study, like what are the goals of BIGKiDs? What would they need to do to be part of the study? And then after getting all this information, families have an opportunity to consent to be in the BIGKiDs Study. And once a patient consents to be in the BIGKiDs Study, we have access to their clinical information, which we can then go through and record and store in an anonymous way so no one else can look at that data. And then we ask patients to provide biosamples. So if the patient's getting a blood test, we ask if we can get an extra tube of blood for research. And if they're not getting a blood test, we ask if they can give a saliva sample so that we can purify DNA. So that's sort of how the BIGKiDs Study works. And one of the most exciting things about the BIGKiDs Study is we've gotten approval from Boston Children's Hospital and the Institutional Review Board of the IRB to recruit patients with nephrotic syndrome from all over the country. So this means that the way BIGKiDs work does not necessarily need to be that I find someone who's at Boston Children's Hospital, approach their physician and ask if they can be enrolled. Instead now, patients from around the country can find information about BIGKiDs from our online website, ultimately our social media channels, through word of mouth, and those patients can then approach us and say, hey, Dr. Sampson, we are calling you from the middle of a state and we're interested in being part of BIGKiDs. And then we can start the whole process of giving informed consent. So the BIGKiDs Study right now is open to anyone who has childhood onset proteinuric kidney disease or nephrotic syndrome. So what's important about what I said is it's just childhood onset. So adults who had nephrotic syndrome as a child could be enrolled in BIGKiDs and be eligible. Children with nephrotic syndrome could obviously be eligible. Patients can be part of BIGKiDs if they have steroid-resistant nephrotic syndrome or steroid-sensitive nephrotic syndrome or steroid-dependent nephrotic syndrome. They can be part of BIGKiDs if they have a family history of nephrotic syndrome, but they can be part of BIGKiDs even if they don't have a family history of nephrotic syndrome. We are open to any child or or any adult with childhood onset nephrotic syndrome. How are BIGKiDs Study participants making an impact? Wow, they're making an impact in many ways. Nephrotic syndrome and proteinuria kidney disease is rare. There are very few patients who have it across the country. So every single patient who donates their clinical information and their samples adds to a critical amount of information that allows us to make discoveries. Because for reasons that are a little bit complicated from a statistical perspective, we need to have more patients to collect data and make observations to be sure that what we're seeing is truly something disease associated. So having just one patient isn't enough. Sometimes having two patients isn't enough. More patients, the better. They're making a difference by donating their information, their samples, and we can then use their information for some studies to map the genetic basis of a disease and find a new genetic cause of disease. In other cases, their contributions are helping us to understand the molecular mechanisms that link the genetic change to nephrotic syndrome. And thirdly, some patients through biosamples will allow us to use their samples to test different drugs ultimately in collaboration with partners to see if we can find cures and treatments for these conditions. Well, I think that not everyone should participate in research. If some people don't feel comfortable doing so, then it's totally fine. They can come in and get great care at Boston Children's Hospital or wherever they are in the country and not be part of a research study. But for the people who want to contribute to an effort that's bigger than themselves, to efforts by scientists and physicians who are trying to create knowledge, treatments, and cures for many, many kids with nephrotic syndrome, then being part of research really helps. Because we can't rely on just one patient or just animal models. We need to rely on our partners who are patients to be part of research to help advance knowledge and make discoveries. Now, why should patients specifically be in the BIGKiDs study? Well, first of all, it's a really cool name, so why wouldn't you want to be part of BIGKiDs? No, but seriously, why should people want to be part of BIGKiDs? Well, I think it's because we're a team of scientists who have shown that we can make discoveries that ultimately matter to nephrotic syndrome research and to patients. So being part of BIGKiDs allows them to be part of a team and a research group that can make meaningful advances in understanding. So why else should patients be interested in enrolling in BIGKiDs? Well, I think that it's not just myself or other members of our lab that's BIGKiDs. BIGKiDs is more investigators, more scientists, more physicians across Boston Children's Hospital, the US, and the world. And we have folks on our team that can make really great use of samples and information to try to make the discoveries that ultimately matter. Now, I think BIGKiDs is pretty awesome, and I think it's pretty special because of the team that made it up and the things we're doing. But BIGKiDs isn't the only research study for nephrotic syndrome. There's lots of nephrotic syndrome studies out there that are very, very interesting. And patients can be involved in multiple types of these studies. So I would never say that BIGKiDs is the only research study patients should want to be in, but certainly one that folks should consider. Yes, they can. They can, absolutely. So if, patients can be enrolled in any number of studies about nephrotic syndrome or other conditions, and they can still be a part of the BIGKiDs study. Well, the first place I would suggest looking is via our website, samsonlab.org. There are links there to the BIGKiDs study where you can learn more. You can also check out our social media channels. We have a Facebook page for BIGKiDs, an Instagram site, and Twitter, where we update and have more information. And finally, you can learn more by just reaching out to us on our websites, my email, phone numbers. You can reach out and find out more information.